Hello, it's Trish here, back again with another quick make. I found the shape of a fabric box and thought I could come up with that, and this is what I made. Just using a couple of fabrics, one for the inside and one for the outside. Could be reversible as well, so whichever colour you like to be on the outside, or you can actually turn it inside out and it's totally reversible. Obviously I've put buttons on this one, so there is the correct way, but you could change to the other colourway if you wanted to. So let's just turn that back. As you know, I love anything made with fabric and anything that is quick to make. So today I'm going to show you how to make this one. This one is based on a 15.5-inch square. I did it that size for ease because I have a square patchwork ruler like so, which is 15.5 inches square. Therefore, I get an exact measurement. There's no actual measuring because I'm cutting around the outsides of it. This other smaller one was based on a 9-inch square, and what I've worked out is basically the size of your cube is approximately a third of the start size of the square that you cut. So you can do these in any size you like, but bear in mind that they'll come down to about a third of the size when it's actually made up. But today I'm going to make the larger of the two. So the first thing I did was to cut myself 2 pieces of fabric, 1, 2, and 1 piece of lightweight wadding. You could use fusible foam, you could use fusible wadding, but I've just used some bog standard fairly lightweight wadding just to give it a little bit of body. So I've already used a little bit of spray adhesive to lightly attach my wadding to the back of 1 piece of fabric. Then with the other piece I'm going to line that up so right sides together, and I'm going to pop a pin at each corner just to hold it in place while I'm stitching. Now, because I'm using wadding, it is a good idea to use a walking foot, but to start off with, because it's just around the outsides, I'm just going to use a standard foot. So not essential, but it is a good idea if you have a walking foot to use one. So as usual, when I am stitching around the edge of a square, I never ever start at the corner. So I'm going to start about 2/3 down one side, and I'm going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam. I'll just start off and I'll reverse just to hold it, because that's the point that I'm going to turn it through to the right side. So I get to the corner, and the other thing you may be able to see is that I'm just pulling the fabric so that the edges line up nicely as I stitch, and pulling it away to the side so that I don't get an excess to one side, and therefore it might come out a little bit wonky. I say these things because I've done it, and therefore I shouldn't do it twice. So I'm just holding it on my left hand edge just to keep the fabric nice and smooth, and still stitching with my 1/4 inch seam. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, also not essential, but it does help. You could even use just your standard foot and just use the side of the foot as a guide. So you'll be taking slightly bigger seam, but it won't make much difference in the overall size when we've finished. So I'm just coming on to the last side now. As I say, it's a nice quick make, and we can make it even quicker. The way I'm going to do it when I've actually stitched all around is I'm going to quilt it, but that also is not essential. So what I was thinking about the quilting, when I came to that, I just used a walking foot because it is a good idea to use the walking foot for the large areas that I was going to be doing. But if you're not particularly used to free motion quilting, it's quite a nice idea to have a little practice, because you don't see too much of the quilting itself, but you could free motion quilt just to give yourself a little bit of practice. What I'm doing now, I'm just clipping off the corners, taking care not to cut through my stitching, and then I'm going to find my opening and I'm just going to turn that to the right side. So I've left a gap of probably 3 to 4 inches, and I'm just going to turn that through. Rather than pushing all of it through at the same time, which makes life difficult sometimes, if you just pull that inside bit through, it comes through a lot easier because you're taking a little bit at a time. Now I'm just going to poke my finger into that corner. I've left a gap big enough that I can get my hand in here, so then I can push my finger into each of the corners to begin with, like so, so that I've pushed them out, and roll with your fingers if you like as well to get those points. And because there's wadding in there, you won't get points that are really collar points, but you'll get some nice rounded points. Now I would preferably use a bone folder or a bamboo turner, but I'm using just the end of my scissors. I'm not poking right into the corners, I'm pushing to the sides because it's not actually a good idea to use your scissors, but they are to hand, and I'm just pushing out to the side so that I'm not likely to make a hole in that point. We've all been there before, I know. So push that one out as well, and then the last one round here. Okay, so that's all done nicely now. So then I would now go to the ironing board and press that all, roll my seams out so they are absolutely on the edge. As the ironing board is not in this room now, I'm just going to do it without. And what I would do here, where I've got my little gap, I actually press the fabric that has no wadding. I would just iron that down with about 1/4 of an inch, but I'm just going to finger press there, and then turn the other side in so that it's nice and level with each other, so that you can't even tell where the opening was. So I'm just going to pin it as I go, just so that I get a nice little seam around the edge. Tuck that in, and hopefully that will be nice and neat, that you can't even see where I'm going to stitch. Now here I would put my walking foot on, and I have got one that I've got a little bit further ahead, but as you can see, what I would do, I start just before my opening so that I close that first of all, and then I'm just going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge the whole way around the square until I get back to the start, and just go 2 or 3 stitches over where I started. Then with the walking foot on, all I'm going to do is quilt about 1 inch apart, but again not crucial. You can put a little marker on your foot so that you can get an exact inch apart if you want to. You can do it closer together, but then that's going to take a little bit longer and unnecessary. Or as I said before, do a little bit of free motion over it just for a little bit of practice. And what I did on the one that I've made in black and white, I started at one end and I came up a straight line, and then I turned, so I'm doing like a spiral, a square spiral, and then just keep going around the edge. When I came back to where I started, I stopped about 1 inch away from that stitching line, and then I came up again and round. So as I say, it's like a spiral but in a square, and if it's all perfectly accurate, you will end up with a little square or a rectangle in the centre, which will be on the base of the box. So I have one that I have already done. So as you can see here, I I have used the walking foot and I've quilted all the way round. Now the next bit to think of, the fabric that you want to be on the outside of your box, at this point you need to be on the inside when you fold it. So we're going to fold the fabrics together with the fabric on the outside but on the inside, the fabric that's going to be on the outside. And what I would do for an extra little bit of care is to actually line those sides up and pin at those corners, just so that when you do a little bit of measuring in a moment, that you'll get it nice and accurate. So there we are. So here what we're going to do now, we have the top of the box here, and then we've got the fold down here. And at each of this corner and this corner, you're going to measure 3.5 inches up and then 3.5 inches along the fold. Now I have already done that, so I'm going to put a pin where I had my marker. And if you would like to draw that line in to stitch down, you can. But for ease and quickness, I'm just going to put a pin in there and a pin in here where I measured my 3.5 inches. Now I have a ruler that is 3.5 inches, so I just pop that on there and then to the side. So each time it's 3.5 inches up the sides and 3.5 inches along the fold. So now all I'm going to do is stitch from that point up the side, and when I start I am actually going to reverse as well, and then I'm just going to eyeball across to the other pin. And I'm just going to take that out just before I get to it and reverse back on again there. So that's that line stitched, and then I'm going to start at the second point. This time I've started on the fold edge and I'm looking at my pin over here and my mark point, and I'm just going to stitch along there and reverse off and clip those threads and clip that thread there. Okay, so now I'm actually going to, there is my stitch line, I'm going to cut this triangle of fabric away. So I'm only going to use about 1/8 of an inch, and so I'm going to be careful and not cut through my stitching, but I've trimmed that now where you can see it's only about 1/8 of an inch away. Because the way we're going to make this is like a French seam, if you left 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, it would make it quite bulky. So on this occasion I decided that it would be smaller. So now that I've done those two, I'm then going to open it out, and I'm actually going to line up. We've now got points. It's a bit of a strange shape, but I'm going to line those points up and pop pins in there at both sides. And then it gives me again that folded edge at the bottom and the sides. So here again I'm going to measure 3.5 inches up the side, which I have already done, and 3.5 inches along that folded bottom edge. And I'm going to pop some pins in there, and then again I'm going to stitch from that pin point down to the other pin point, and I'm starting and I'm reversing down to my pin again and off and reverse stitch just to hold that, make that nice and secure. So clip those threads off, and then the other side, because I've pinned the top, I can see, I'm not going to pop a pin there because I can see exactly where my marker is. So stitch onto there, reverse, and over to my other point that I had already marked, and off. See how quick this is? And clip those threads out of the way. And again, there's my stitch line. I'm going to trim about 1/8 of an inch away from my stitched line. It just makes it easier to feel as well. And there's my other side, and I'm going to clip 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from there as well. Okay, just a little bit more there. Right, can you believe it? We're nearly there. So I'll take those pins out, and actually if any of you have made any of those soup bowl holders, it is quite similar to that. So at this point I'm going to turn it to the other side, which is going to be my right side, which is quite seasonal, being a little bit of holly. Just poke those corner points out, and then I'm just going to hold, so I've poked these points out here, I'm just going to hold that together, and I can feel where my seam needs to be. That 1/8 of an inch that I left there, I've left, and I can feel that like that. So I'm rolling the seams out so they're right on the edge, and now I'm just going to stitch with probably 1/4 of an inch, or perhaps just under 1/4 of an inch, but enough so that it encloses my seam allowance, which I just cut away earlier. So I'm back to the sewing machine, and again I'm going to start and then I'm going to reverse off there, and you can even see if you press your fingers down on that seam, you can feel the seam allowance, and you know that you're then enclosing. So I'm just coming up to the end there, and I reverse off and clip my threads, and the threads at the end as well. So then I'm going to turn to my next corner. So I've got 4 sides, and these will make the sides of the box. So as I said again, reverse off, just take that. You can use your foot as a guide. I am using just over the 1/8 of an inch setting, and that's so that I make sure that seam allowance is enclosed in my seam now. And I did say earlier that you could turn it inside out again so that these French seams are covered. However, I just think it gives more shape. If you like it to look squarer, it does look a little bit squarer if you have these seams on the outside. So reversing off there. So that's side 3. All I'm thinking now for you, if you've got that last minute quick gift to make, when somebody's popped to your door and said, I brought a little Christmas gift for you, and you haven't actually bought one for them, there's something here that you could make very quickly and be delivering it this evening. So nearly there. Okay, so last one stitched. Okay, so there we have. Just pop my fingers down into the base. Gives a lovely square base. I'm not going to stitch buttons on at the moment, so I'm just going to pin it. But there you can see, we just turn that point over. I'll pop a pin in there to hold that flap down. And I'll put a pin in here to put that down, and here. So the other thing, apart from buttons, if you wanted to put those cam snaps or press studs, you could do that as well. But there is our box, quickly made and a lovely shape. Thanks for watching. I'll be back again. I've got lots more to show you. But have a lovely Christmas, and I'll see you again in the new year. Thank you. Bye-bye.